Good evening. I want to express my appreciation to those who've spoken before. I want to recognize that we're all speaking in the traditional territory of Treaty 6. I want to thank the Grand Chief for her presentation. And it's a great privilege to be here tonight. I also want to thank Ryan McMahon very much for confirming what I already knew. And that is that all those people who were demonstrating at Queen's Park while I was Premier didn't really know what they were protesting about. Because we're under this time pressure, I'm going to try to get to my remarks as quickly as possible and say that the theme of my remarks is that at the moment the country, most of the country, is based on a misunderstanding. As in many relationships, it's important to be aware of the fact that some people see the relationship in a certain way and other people see the relationship in another way. And in order to get to a better understanding, we need to know what the misunderstanding is. And I can't claim originality for this idea because I heard it at a conference on Aboriginal law last summer in Iqaluit. But it struck me as having such an important element to it that I wanted to try to extrapolate from it in a bit of a semi-legal riff that I'm going to do. From the non-Aboriginal perspective, if you look at it historically, people came to this part of the world believing that they were superior and they were better. For a long time, they insisted that there was actually no one here. It was known as Terra Nullius, the land of no one. And the assumption was that North America was discovered, which would come as news to the millions of people who already lived here. But we have to understand the comprehension, the understanding of imperialism, if you like, of colonialism, in order to understand what we have to overcome. So, empires were created and established, and relationships from this perspective, again, not from my own, but I'm trying to describe inside the heads of these people. So whether it was the royal proclamation or whether it was a treaty that was being signed, it's important to understand that from the perspective of those who signed it, from the government side, from the side of the crown, the purpose of the treaty was not to recognize a relationship between equals. The purpose of the treaty was to draw a line in the sand and say, you have relinquished your title, you have surrendered your title, you have released your title to the crown. And that's why the written documents of the treaties are so different from the narrative that we've heard today. The narrative of the First Nations is, well, first of all, as Clayton has said, hey, it's a treaty, which implies that it's a relationship between governments, which implies that it's a solemn document which expresses a relationship between peoples, which implies that it's the establishment of a relationship which will continue over time. But when you think about when the treaties were signed, let's remember what else was going on. The Indian Act was being passed in Ottawa in 1876. Which created the reserve system. The residential school system was being set up across the country to take the Indian out of the child. And the Prime Minister of the day, Sir John A. Macdonald, said, the only way to prevent these children from becoming savages is to remove them from the savage environment in which they're living. It was a policy of extinguishment. And this is the same group, this is the same thinking that gave rise to why the written treaties say what they say and how the Crown has continued to interpret those treaties. It's important to remember that as we celebrate all the victories in the Supreme Court of Canada, who's been on the other side of every single one of those cases? Our governments, federally and provincially. They still do not get that the treaties were not a divorce, they were a marriage. You know, a divorce, you get this, we get that, and it's the ending of a relationship. It's a termination. It's saying, no, we're not, you get that. That's all you get. You get the reserve land, and that's what you get. You don't get anything else. The Crown gets the rest of it. Why were these treaties signed from the perspective of the governments? They were signed to clear the land, to limit where people could go and what people could do, what businesses they could enter, whether they could even hire a lawyer. I'm not pitching for work, but to me it's quite extraordinary that you'd say you can't even hire a lawyer, you can't even have counsel. And so we need to understand what it is we have to overcome. And that's the challenge. One recent judgment of the Supreme Court of Canada, the Chief Justice, at that time, Mr. Lemaire, said, "We're all here to stay." And that's what I've heard tonight has been such a reflection of that. The creation of space, the recognition of culture, the recognition of language, the recognition that history did not start in 1492. The understanding that people have been living in this part of Canada and in every part of Canada for thousands of years. And that is the relationship that has to be created. More than half the population of First Nations, Aboriginal people of Canada, is now living in cities. And more than half that population is under the age of 25. It is the fastest growing population in the country. And I say to everyone in this hall, and I say to whoever is listening or watching, as a country, we now face a choice. Do we celebrate this and make it work and make it happen? Or do we continue to see it as a problem, a difficulty, an inconvenience, a nuisance, someone we have to avoid while walking down the street, someone has to be walked over or walked around? All the statistics of breakdown and suicide and criminalization that we face. This is the choice we face as a country. And it is a choice that speaks to every Canadian. We think it's just, it only affects those people. It only affects the Aboriginal people, such a small group in the country. But with the transformation of the city has to come a transformation of our consciousness and our awareness and our identity in the creation of a new country. a country that is not based on some people thinking they're better than others. A country that is based not on who has the majority and who has the power, but a country that is based on the call of justice and the call of love. We need truth, and we're beginning to talk about the truth. And then comes the hard part of reconciliation. How do we get to a better place? And the only way we get to a better place is by understanding from whence we have all come. Some of the baggage we have to throw away. The institutions we have to create. The cities we have to build. The schools we have to make. The cultures we have to celebrate. But what a wonderful, wonderful enterprise in which to engage all of this country. This Canada is our rendezvous with who we are. This is our destiny as a country. And this is the path we are on. Hi, hi.